Welcome to Beauty as a Birthright, a podcast that explores awakening our six senses: touch, smell, sight, hearing, taste, and intuition through embodied Taoist practices. I'm Dr. Tamsin Lee, a Taoist metaphysical expert and founder of Elemental Archetypes, sharing face reading, Batsa astrology, and seasonal living.
And I'm Dr. Paige Yang, owner of an integrative health clinic in Honolulu and founder of Yang Face, a culturally appreciative Chinese facial tool brand. Join us on our personal journeys as we navigate the complexity of inner, outer, and relational beauty. We'll chat about how awakening our beauty through the six senses impacts our relationship to aging, childhood trauma, romantic relationships, motherhood, dating, careers, and so much more.
Let's awaken our senses and explore beauty as a birthright.
Hello, hello. We are back, everyone, and we are just going to jump right in to this episode. It's going to be a really fun episode. Tamsin and I are going to be exploring kind of like this, in line with this Halloween theme. And I don't know if you want to just jump in, Tamsin, and talk about what we were hoping to get to today in this nice short episode.
Yeah, it's like the day before Halloween, so I thought it'd be really cool to talk about like ghosts and spirits and maybe relate it back to Chinese medicine. But I was curious to know, have you ever seen a ghost before?
I've seen many ghosts.
Oh, okay. Of course.
So I would say
tell me the best ghost story. Let's start with that.
The best ghost story. I think the one that stands out the most is when I was the ages, I think like 3 to 5th grade, 3 years old to 5th grade. We were living in this house that was underneath a highway construction.
Oh.
And this highway being constructed, it wasn't right underneath, but it was kind of like at the base, the landing of the mountains that it was being constructed at. And this construction was met with a lot of pushback because a lot of the construction here, inevitably, it has to dig up burial grounds, and it stirs up a lot of spirits. And indigenous Native Hawaiian people, they really don't like that. And they also, they don't love the development and what like a highway or freeway can represent in terms of development. So I was probably somewhere between the ages of 6 and 7. And there was an adolescent Native Hawaiian boy who would be at our house playing with me. And did you ever play jacks?
Oh, yeah, with the ball and the metal thing?
Yeah. Yep. So we would play jacks together. And I don't think I understood that he was a ghost. And then what had happened was my dad, on 2 occasions, our smoke detector went off. And when my dad would look, that same boy would be underneath his smoke detector, which was outside of my parents' bedroom. And my dad, as an adult, knew that it was a ghost. So he'd be scared. And he didn't know if this boy was mischievous. So he would run the boy out of the house. And the boy would just like run down the hallway and like out the door, but the door wasn't open, like nothing opened or closed. He just like, went through out the door, out the wall. And that happened to my dad twice. And then like our 2 stories came together and we realized that our family had this adolescent ghost for that time of the construction.
And then when it was done, he was gone?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
It was under construction for a really long time, but we only lived in that house like at the very end part of the construction.
Oh my God. Kid ghosts are scary to me. But he wasn't scary to you. He was like a friend.
No. And I think he was totally innocent. I think just so happened that our smoke detector would pick up pick up something within his spirit. Because obviously like a normal human, like solid non-ghost entities can be under a smoke detector. It's not going to go off. Yeah. But it would go off with him under it.
Oh my gosh. So Like, what is your idea of ghosts? Like, why do you think spirits stick around?
Oh, wow. I think there's I could go, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but before I really jump into them, because then I'll feel like I'm talking too much. What about you and your ghost stories, and like one that stands out if you've seen or had experiences with them?
I've seen lots of ghosts too. I mean, there was like a time, I mean, even when I was a kid, and then there was a time where like my friends all knew I saw ghosts. So like whenever there was some like thing that they weren't sure that was haunted, like a piece of furniture or something, like the joke would be like, oh, just give it to Tamsin for a few days and she'll figure it out. But like I didn't know they were doing that. And it was like afterwards they would tell me. um I guess I mean I have a good one, but this is much more of like a famous one. So I used to work at this really famous hotel in New York. And New York, I think, because it's such an old city, it's like just so many spirits. And this hotel, though, the New York Times had written a review about it because it was like, I think, an empty space for a long time. And this was like in the meatpacking district when that area now is like, it's beautiful. But when I was growing up, it was just a meat pack. Like the meats would come in like cows hanging, and it was a very industrial place. But now it's all like boutique hotels and posh restaurants and shops. So the New York Times had written this thing that these hotel entrepreneurs had bought this space and they were turning into a hotel and restaurant and club. And it was the whole thing. Like New York always knew this place was haunted. Like it was just one of those buildings where everyone knew it was haunted. And a long time ago, it used to be an orphanage for children. And
Oh,
then
wow.
it became a maritime for sailors. Already it's spooky. Kids, sailors. I just um and I worked downstairs at the nightclub and I just did not like it. I'd always get like a weird vibe from the place. I could feel the energy. But and it was a place where a lot of celebrities would come to. And I would hear so many things from the people that worked at the hotel. Like people would call in and being like, there's kids running around in the hallway. There was this one celebrity who was at the penthouse, and the penthouse, it was only two, and you need a special elevator key to get there. And he had called like all weekend. He's like, there's like kids running out in the penthouse, but he was the only one staying there. And I heard other things like the front desk people would be looking at the security cameras during night and they would see flashes of kids in the mirror just
Okay.
I never saw anything there, but I could sense it. But I also, at that time in my life, I was just like not spiritual whatsoever. I mean, I was working at a club, but I could always sense that something was there. And yeah, it was just kind of like a spooky place.
Wow, that is so. Well, what is it called? What's this place called?
I don't want to say.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's
I think
safe.
it's still there. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, but back to your question about you had asked what I thought ghosts were or something like that, or
Yeah.
what the.
Yeah. Especially like kids, little kids.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so many theories that I think I find all to be like I entertain all of them because ultimately, like I don't know, and I don't know if we can ever definitively know. But stories like depending on the circumstances in which they passed, if there was unfinished business, or if they're confused and in limbo and not sure how to cross over to the afterworld, um, or if there's things that they like, if they're waiting for certain family members and they still want to make their presence known. I mean, I think all of those make a lot of sense to me. I know you just recently finished your Hungry Ghost workshop, and while that might not literally be ghosts, depending, I'm curious how you understand them and then how you ground it in Chinese metaphysics.
Yeah, so I think it's important to distinguish that there are like different types of spirits in East Asian cultures, like
Mm-hmm.
ghosts, spirits, demons, entities. They're all very different things, right? And the thing that spirits and ghosts have is that they were human before. That's the distinguishing thing. As opposed to
Yeah.
like entities or demons, it was a whole other thing. And they were never humans. Uh, and so hungry ghosts, yeah, they were humans. And it's similar, like unfinished business, but also like they had this incredible, insatiable attachment or cravings that in this lifetime that they weren't able to go like they weren't able to overcome. And so when they die, they become hungry ghosts. And if you look at pictures of hungry ghosts in East Asian culture, it's really interesting because they have these like big mouths and these really skinny neck and this big belly. And that's supposed to symbolize their insatiable hunger, whether it's for money or love or validation, success, material stuff. Um, that they can never, like, they're constantly trying to feed themselves, but they'll never be satiated, which is such a deep sense of suffering. And then, we can
Mm-hmm.
take that concept and talk about hungry ghosts in our own life right now. But it's also like in East Asian culture, it's a lot about maybe also improper burials. Like they weren't
Yeah.
buried correctly, or they didn't receive the sacred rituals that they were supposed to receive. And so they keep coming back, wanting the people who are still here, their family, to send them off in the
Mm-hmm.
right way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and then and then they just roam around, I guess. Like, so it's the whole thing is like we always think like ghosts are malicious and scary. And I think in East Asian culture, those are more like entities or demons. But the
Right.
thing to remember about these spirits is, even though may seem scary to us, like they're not really here for malicious intent. Like everything they do, or the reason why they're here, it's because they're like in a state of suffering.
Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is that what first I'll go back to what you said about the burial thing. And
Mm.
I can relate this to like how my mom's side of the family practiced Buddhism and the Buddhist funerals or burials that I had attended as a young child. And I remember my grandma telling me that to make sure that you don't scatter someone's ashes in different places.
Oh
And I think
yeah.
this can very much be a Western culture thing. Well, they'll be like, oh, they love the Rocky Mountains. So we're going to put some in the Rocky Mountains. And we had this amazing memory in Las Vegas. And I'm going to make sure some of them is in Las Vegas. And then they love the ocean, but they love Lake Tahoe. And I'm going to put them in Lake Tahoe. And I'm like, oh no, they're going to have a hard time collecting parts of themselves and transitioning. They're going to be like, where is everything? What is like this? And then another thing that I think it was my grandma's sister, she told me not to be an organ donor on the license. I thought that was very interesting. When I first got my driver's license, I put that I was an organ donor, and I like shared it with I like showed my family that I just got to my license. And my grandma's sister was like, you shouldn't be an organ donor. And at first I was like, oh God, that's so cold. Like, I feel like I could give myself to science and all this stuff and be helpful and whatever. You don't know the circumstances in which you'll pass and if you could save another life, right? That's like the story. But then now I understood where she was coming from like her lens, where it was like parts of me that do house different spirits would be like, I don't know, they would be like dealt to different places, transitioning at different times and like discombobulated for when I'd be passed away. And you hear of people that get organs from others and they start to take on their traits.
Oh, I was just
Well,
going to
they'll meet
talk
like a
about that.
family member. Yeah. And like they'll be like, wow, after this kidney transplant or whatever it was, like suddenly they like this specific food or music and it like reminds them, it's super healing for the family that their loved one passed because they'll be like, oh, that's just like how my son used to be, or whatever it is. And it's really interesting though how, like, at least the way my family practices Buddhism, they don't like that thought for their loved ones
Because
to
part
be
of you is
dealt
still
out like
here.
that.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Right. And that. So you
Cool.
couldn't make a smooth transition.
Are you an organ donor now?
I'm not.
Oh.
I'm not anymore. And I feel like, but it's just like that sunk into me so hard. And then my uncle did our will and trust. And I also felt like, on my mom's side of the family. So I felt like I kind of wanted to keep the things that I learned from our family when I
Mhm.
did my will and trust. But what do you
Oh.
think as I'm sharing all of this and the things you grew up with?
I mean, that makes sense. Like, and I've definitely seen that in patients. Like, I used to work at a practitioners group, so most of my patients were actually in very critical conditions and either
Mm-hmm.
dying or waiting for organ transplant or something, because we were right near the hospital. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I had this one patient that was like very difficult, just a difficult person, but she was waiting for like a heart and a liver transplant or something. I can't remember. Like really
Mm-hmm.
weak, but also just a very mean, angry person. And then she got her organ replacement and she was completely different. Like even
Wow.
her cadence and her voice was very different. And it was so wild. And that's when I started doing research of like, what happens when people get different people's organs? And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, that is wild. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
The other thing I thought about when you talked about like entities and spirits is I also understood it, even demons, um and learned that their purpose was to maintain a certain order. And in the like laws of order and chaos, or yin and yang, um above and below, like all of those levels, that their job was to maintain a certain order. And even to this extent, like angels, like if people see like demons and then they think angels, I also learned that, and in Western religions, I think we're supposed to believe angels to be, these like very beautiful, bright light, about to save your life beings. And I know that that can be a lot of people's experience in near-death experiences or when miracles happen. But the way I learned is, regardless of how they might appear, their job is to really keep in order.
So what do you mean about order?
And if things are supposed to happen when they're supposed to happen, or not supposed to happen when they're not supposed to happen, like
Uh,
even angels, like archangels, they're depicted with weapons.
yeah.
If you look at, yeah. And so they're fierce and you're supposed to listen to them. And so, maybe someone was not supposed to pass when they, like when a timeline jumped and they were in a situation where they're going to pass, and an angel might swoop in and be like, oh, no, you can't pass now because this is not the order. This is not how it's supposed to happen. And then you hear people being like, whoa, the angel of mercy came and saved my life. Or it can be the other way around where, I've heard stories of
The
family
demons are like, it's
members.
time for you to go.
Well, but also angels, also knowing that it's part of keeping the order.
Oh.
So, like, let's say, like, a parent passing might save their child's life,
Hmm.
and that was the order. That's how it's supposed to happen. But I don't know. The thing is, like, that I always come back to is there's no way of absolutely knowing, but it's just so interesting to think about.
Yeah, I like the idea. Like, I know it's spooky. I'll probably have nightmares tonight. I kind of like the ideas there are like spirits everywhere roaming and we can't see them all the time, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like this other realm between life and death. And
Mm-hmm.
have you ever seen somebody in real life possessed, and not, I'm not talking like exorcist possession, but like maybe hungry ghost possessions, or just they just have a weird vibe, or you just like something about them, you're like, I don't want to be near this. This is not, it's not good energy.
Yeah. I think I think a decent amount of times being a clinician, and especially
Yeah.
when we were having to do like clinical rotations, and some of the places that I worked at in the city or got clinical hours in San Francisco had some of those characters
Yeah. But in personal
where
life?
you knew personal life. Yes, I'd say depending on like some people's stages of their lives,
Oh.
I think that in those moments they probably had some kind of possession or external influence that was not theirs, that either attached or was like this, hungry ghost trying to fulfill something that they weren't able to have satisfied. But what about
Yeah.
yourself?
Well, in the workshop, I talk about these things that I call like everyday possessions. So it's not
Mm.
like exorcism where, you're like vomiting and like climbing up on the walls, I mean, but more of these like really subtle things that happen, where it's like these moments of possessions where it's like maybe we react in a way that's not our usual way of reacting, and it's very primal, or you actually see people who, I've definitely in my personal life, many people who are possessed, and you can see it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not just like the everyday possessions I'm talking about. It's like something much deeper. And it's like, it can play out lots of different ways. They could be like complete narcissists, or just really self-deprecating, or people pleasing, or it just shows up in so many different ways, but it's like they're not their whole self. And
Mm-hmm.
I was funny. I went to dinner with my friends yesterday, and they were talking about like, where we were talking about possessions. I'm not going to share their story, but I've definitely also had experiences where people are possessed and they don't know they're possessed, and I sense it,
Mm-hmm.
and then they come into my space, like my apartment, and then the ghost stays here, and I've had to do a massive
Mm-hmm.
clearing of that, and being like, and I think at the time I realized that, okay, I'm not scared of ghosts, because there's so many, because I used to see so many ghosts as a kid, and I was like really scared. But this ghost was like, the spirit was like, he it was just so needy. He was like just wanting to be loved, and like definitely a hungry ghost. And so I kind of kept it here for a few days. I was like, you can hang out, you can stay, like, but then after a while, I'm like, you cannot stay because you are going to impact me. I'm going to, it's going to be my possession. But it was like stuck in this one
Yeah.
place in my apartment. So every time I
Wow.
come in, I'd be like, hey, what's up? Like, look. But I could feel this energy just being very like wanting desperately to be loved and cared for. And so I didn't want to be like, get out of here, because
Yeah.
and so this clearing that I did was very different than other clearings that I've done, where it wasn't coming from a place of my own fear, where I basically said, you can't stay here because you don't belong to me. You don't belong in this space. And you have to
Mm-hmm.
go back to where you come from, and like
Mm-hmm.
send it off to like the person who brought it here with love. I'm like, you have to go. You
Right.
have to go. And I did it for like a few days, and yeah, it left. But I thought
And
that was
then,
really
wow.
interesting. I'm like, don't come
Knowing
back.
what you know. Yeah. Wow, close the door behind you
And
and I'll get the door.
I don't let anybody in my place. Like, I had a best friend. Like, we weren't best friends then, but he had to pee, and like we were just hanging out. Like, we've known each other for like a couple years, but I'm very like, it takes me a long time to get into friendships, and he had to like pee, and he's like, can I use your bathroom? I'm like, I don't know, bro. Like, we just met. He's like, we met 2 years ago. We're friends. We hang out all the time. I'm like, I don't know. I'm very like careful as who come into my space. So
I love that actually, because I've been in a few situations where I've asked someone to use their bathroom and there were like decent acquaintances and they've said no, and I was super into it. I was like,
really,
whoa, that is powerful. Like I remember I like drove really far, picked up food from this like private chef for this girls' weekend that my friends and I were having, and we wanted someone to cook for us. Like drove super far. I was gonna have to drive really far again. It was in Oakland. I wasn't like familiar with any bathrooms, and I was like, "Hey, do you think I could use your bathroom?" And she was like, "No." And I like loved. I was like, "That is pretty awesome that someone told me I couldn't use their bathroom." Like, I don't know why it leaves like this really cool impression on me because I'm like, you have the courage and such a strong boundary that if there's anything in you that doesn't want to do that, you're going to say no.
For
And there was
me,
like another time that was that.
no, go
I
ahead.
mean, you kind of did it, right? Like you did it to your friend.
Well, I mean, for me, it's energy. Like my home is my sacred place. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's where I come and rest. It's where I can like put my feet up and just decompress. And so
Right.
I live in a small space, but I think even if I had a bigger space, I would be very careful as to, and I have had friends that are like, oh, we should have like a movie night. I'm like, no, because your energy is off, man. Like,
Uh-huh. Well, knowing what you know now about the senses and the work you've done around it, particularly with touch, is there anything you can think of, like in hindsight, that you would have done when you, let's say, had that ghost hanging out in your space for a while? Is there any of the senses or did you utilize any of them to kind of work through that time
okay.
and understand how to go about it?
Yeah, I'll tell a quick story. Not that related, but I actually was going to ask you something similar, but um I think it's interesting because I had another spirit here and I still don't know where
Mm-hmm.
she came from or where she goes but it happened 2 or 3 times when I'm sitting here in this seat actually. Um I smell an old woman's perfume. It'll just come. And it's the only time I've sensed a spirit in that way is through scent. And I don't know what this perfume is, but I know it's like an older person's perfume or like sometimes like old back in the day, like the Korean creams that were really like, super oily had this like perfumey kind of scent to it. Um, but I thought that was so interesting that like that's the sense that because when you think of ghosts, it's like oh you see them or you hear them, but in that time it was actually a scent thing.
Right.
Have you like how do you sense ghosts? Seeing or hearing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I feel them physically. Like I've had spirits touch my feet. So I was talking to a friend about this, and she was saying that spirits that don't want to scare you, but they want you to know that they're there. They'll often just like touch your feet or come to the foot of your bed and put their hand on your ankles or just sit at the foot of your bed. And so it's a way to be like, I don't want to scare you, but I want you to know that I'm here. And then this other time, I was sleeping at my parents' house one night with my son. This is when we were still living in California, so we would stay with them when we'd come back home to Hawaii. And this like older man that may have been the previous owner of my parents' home, he came and like tried to give me a hug and when I was sleeping, and I woke up and freaked out, and it was my son. So I think he like entered my son's body for a second to try to embrace me. It wasn't like a poor intention. It just felt like he thought, oh, this might be a really nice opportunity to feel a hug again. And so
Oh, so
this
it wasn't like
boy
a
is,
man spirit that you knew.
yeah. And so he like entered my son to hug me. And then I freaked out, and then he disappeared, and it ended up just being my son. And so it's been this touch thing. And there's other times when I've felt hands on me, like something like on my shoulder or my back, it feels like they're letting me know that they're here.
From spirits that you
Yeah.
know? People like past or just any?
I think so, but and or any. But like in the one, I try to comfort myself by feeling like, oh, that must be my auntie, or
Yeah.
that must be my friend's mom, something like that. But maybe I have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
So touch would probably be the sense that signals me.
Ooh. Oh my God. I don't want
Yeah.
anyone touching my feet or my ankles.
Well, this was a nice, sweet episode. Were there any other things you wanted to share, Tamsin, before we?
No, I think that's it. I think yeah. It's nice to it's nice to just recognize spirits and like maybe, you know, all of us can just take some time to like honor our loved ones who have passed, do a little ritual. I love like the thing that I've been telling my clients is that you know, altars, at least for East Asian cultures, is we create these altars so that our loved ones know that they can come back when they want to, because there are these holidays or festivals that we celebrate
Yep.
where the veils are thin, and other cultures have that as well. And these
Mhm.
are who have passed. They're not like hungry ghosts. They're not here roaming the world, but on these certain days they can come and visit us. But they can't come and visit us if we don't have this altar set up for them to let them know that they can
Mhm.
come. So I love that, and I tell clients with pets or like fur babies that have passed, you can do the same thing, like cute little
Mhm.
doggy ghosts coming to see you.
Mm.
And yeah, so that's something nice to do maybe during Halloween or the next month or so.
Yes. The other thing I would offer for those who may have had a loved one that recently passed was what I also learned within the Buddhist side of my family is soon after someone passes, to just remind them what they meant to you and your family and how you like value them and saw them, and kind of like the role that they played for you in your life. And I learned that that really helps them to transition smoothly, because we never know how someone will feel when they pass, if they'll be afraid or if they'll feel scared, like I guess the same as afraid, or if they'll be confused, or if they're going to want to linger and think that they need to stick around for you. But it's almost like a way to send them on their way. It's like to validate all that they meant to you in their earthside lifetime. And then they can take that and feel like rest assured when they move on. So
Yeah.
that would be something that I would offer too. And then once that all happens, what you talked about with the altars, and those would be really, really nice.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, hope everyone has had a fun spooky season. And we'll look forward to our next episode.
Bye.
Bye. Well, that's it for today. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend and give us a review to let us know how you've been navigating your beauty journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Beauty Birthright Pod and say hello.
To learn more about face reading, Batsa astrology, and seasonal living, head over to elementalarchetypes.com and follow me at Elemental Archetypes.
And to explore beauty through your own hands, visit yangface.com and follow at yang.face for tutorials, Chinese medicine theory, and candid thoughts on cultural appreciation.